You're listening to Just a Dude podcast with your host, Nathan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's roll. What's up, dudes and dudettes? Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, where we keep it real and dive into some dope stories. Today, I've got a guy who's lived a wild life, written a killer book, and it's all about giving people second chances. Please welcome to the show John Graham, author of Running as Fast as I Can and the dude behind Good Samaritan Home. Today, we're going to talk about John's journey, his book, and some heavy life lessons, maybe a few curveballs in Dude Q&A round. Let's get into it. John, welcome to Just a Dude podcast.
Listen, my pleasure. I'm very glad reading the overview. I can't wait to hear what we have to say.
All right, excellent. Well, let's start at the beginning, because I know you're not just some random guy out there with a pen. You've got a story. So tell me a little bit about growing up and what got you to where you are now, kind of your origin story.
Oh, buckle up for this one, because I don't think it's as strange a story as I think it is. I think it's fairly common. But I grew up in the 60s amidst all the upheaval and protest. Even though I wasn't involved directly in it, it was part of my backdrop. We grew up thinking that the Cold War was normal. And so I went to college thinking that I was going to somehow change the world if I could just get a bachelor's degree. And when I graduated, 1970, just after Kent State shootings, the country was in chaos, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had a degree in psychology and no direction and no support, because basically I had brought up myself alone. I put myself through college, had worked every summer, and I like to say that we lived alone together in my house growing up. And so here I was, a college graduate, thinking that I was smart, but I was unhireable because I wasn't trained for anything. And so I ended up, at one point, I was a substitute school teacher. I was a truck driver. I was a fireman. I was a building contractor. I was a door-to-door salesman. I was children's home counselor. I was even, at one point, I thought I would try to make a difference by being a minister, until I realized that being a minister is very political at times. And I approach working with people like I did with construction. If something doesn't fit, you get a bigger hammer, and that doesn't work with people. It doesn't work at all.
No, does it?
So here I was. I had been through 8 careers, 30 years, raised a family, been in and out of, at times, near or homeless, moved through 4 states, and had created a great deal of instability for my family. So I was 53 years old. And being a man, you understand there's a great deal of pressure on men to be performers, to provide for your family, to be the stable. Like one person said to my wife, because she had to clean somebody's house to make ends meet that year. And she said that she thought I was the laziest man she'd ever seen. And I wasn't lazy. I just couldn't find work. And so, but the perception is, if you're not producing in a quote normal job, there's something wrong with you. So
sure. And even the added on there is being a man, right? Our job, or, especially back then, and even when I was younger, was to provide. That is the number one goal, right, of a man, is to provide for the family. So you feel that struggle. And then, when you don't have a job or can't find something, you really take that to heart, don't you?
There's nothing so, I almost say humiliating, because that's really what it is looking through. We used to look through the one ads and looking for a job and saying, well, maybe I could work here, or maybe I could work here. And I do remember I taught myself construction, and that meant you make a lot of mistakes. And I would take on work that I really wasn't qualified for, but I was bright enough to try to learn. But I remember saying, I'm way over my head. How am I going to get away with this? How am I going to do this? And I just couldn't breathe. But the pressure to provide for my family was so intense that finally, at one point, I called a friend of mine in Texas, and I said, do you have anything? And he said, no problem. There's plenty of work in Texas. So I got in my truck and I drove 1,200 miles, left my family because they were in Kentucky at the time. And we were $10,000 in debt and with no work. Here I went to Texas and I moved into a flea bag motel and I worked 7 days a week, lost 30 pounds working every day. And this is Texas heat. And I paid back that loan in 3 months and brought my
Wow.
family down with me. And we rented a house. And for the next 5 years, we had a successful time in Texas in construction. And so that was a very positive thing until I said, well, maybe I can do more because we were building very expensive homes. And the 60s social worker in me wanted to do more than just build houses and make money.
Hmm.
So I said, I'll go back to school. And that's when I decided to see if I could be a minister. But a minister it wasn't the job that I thought it was. It was very political. So that led to 53 years old and not knowing what I was going to do. And that's when my wife and I said, if we feel this way, are there other people who feel the same way? So we said, let's try to help those who are struggling as much as we are. And maybe in helping them, we can create something that we are good at. So we started a nonprofit called Good Samaritan Home, bought the oldest house in town, and it was 150 years old, needed a boatload of renovations. But my
I'm sure.
background, my background allowed me to do that, and so I promised her I'd have it renovated in 3 months. It took 14 years, but she stayed with me. And what we did, we opened that house as a homeless shelter. We lived in it and shared it with homeless people. And
Nice.
eventually, the I was doing some work with the parole officer locally, and he said, "Could you take somebody coming from prison in your shelter, and we will offer you a per diem so that your costs could be offset." And that's what Good Samaritans started working with the Ohio Department of Correction. And we started in our own house, in one of our upstairs bedrooms, taking a man came from across the state in Cleveland, had been in prison for 5 years, and he was looking for a second chance restart of his life, just like I was. He just happened to have been in prison.
Hmm.
I had been in a lot of gray career moves, but we all needed a second chance. And that was the beginning of 24 years of Good Samaritan Home working with the Department of Correction. And now we have 21 houses, 10 staff,
Wow.
and we've helped 2,500 men and women restart their lives after prison. So it's been extremely successful. And in fact, I just tonight before I could talk to you, I hired one of my former residents. He's going to be part-time
Nice.
staff, and he was with us, I think, 10 years ago, right out of prison, and now he's going to be part of our staff.
Nice. And John, is the Good Samaritan Home, I know you said you have multiple locations. Are you only in Ohio or are you throughout the country?
Only in Ohio, because even though Ohio is perceived as being a very conservative state, the truth is, when it comes to corrections and rehabilitation, it's extremely progressive. The idea is that prisons don't solve problems. They stop people, but they don't prepare them for working and living outside of prison. So all the research showed that if you do something in community, if you have oversight and accountability in community, where people can get a job, they can pay their child support, they can buy goods, pay rent, they can be a tax payer instead of a tax burden. Then
You're
everybody
right.
wins. And that's what we're part of. So it's an extremely effective program.
Yeah, that's amazing. And John, the reason I say that is I've heard of Good Samaritan Home because I live in Ohio. So you mentioned Kent State. I'm 5 miles away from Kent State University. So I know exactly where that is. I know everything about Ohio, but it is funny that you say that because my wife and I just took a trip down to the old Mansfield Reformatory this last weekend. And that was one of their things that they said, even back in I think that prison was built in the early 1900s. They were even thinking about reforming prisoners as opposed to just locking them up and throwing away the key.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I'm very pleased with the thinking in Columbus when it comes to this, because in fact, they just called us today and said that when you have a resident, our program ideally is for 90 days short term, but the average stay is a year because it takes time to get a job, save money, and to find an apartment, particularly now when apartments cost you $1,000 a month. So,
Yeah, I can't believe that. That's I mean, who
well,
could, just a normal everyday person that's just has a job, it has a hard time getting an apartment today. Now add that, you might be a former convicted felon on top of that. It's gonna make it even harder for you to find a place.
it's amazing, particularly if you got anything that says violent or drug related, which is very common, because
Mhm.
people are scared to death, landlords, of drug related offenses because they think you're going to be selling through their house.
Yeah. Yep.
And I've found that the drug issue is probably the most difficult to deal with because it's an addiction. And not that the
Mhm.
people don't care or don't try, it's just that it's very, very hard to overcome. And the failure rate is about 7 times in rehab before you can finally kick an addiction. And
Yeah, it's
it could be, it's not those people, it's my neighbors, it's my children, it's my brothers and sisters,
exactly.
it's us.
It's
It's
everybody.
us.
It's,
Yeah.
someone you might work with outside, in a regular job that they could be them. The drug addiction, alcohol addiction affects so many people. And I don't think people realize how many folks out there, how many people actually probably have an issue with drugs or alcohol. You know, it's a very big problem.
We don't have many women in our program, but the few we've had, it's always addiction issues. And what happened was you have a mother or a grandmother, and because she's addicted, she loses custody of her children, and then she loses her home. And so here she is in our shelter on probation because of an addiction. And she may have tried and failed several times. I just got a call just last week. One of our model residents was picked up for a DUI because she is an alcoholic. And so she's now sitting in jail. And she was one of the best workers at the restaurant where she had a job. So it's not just frustrating; it's sad.
Yeah, and it's such a devastating and debilitating disease that people don't realize the more and longer you go with it without seeking help, the more it takes away from your life and your control.
Yeah,
So it's a good
absolutely.
message out there is if you know you have a problem or even think you have a problem, seek help. There's plenty out there for sure.
That's absolutely, and even a small town. We live northwest of Dayton, in a Greenville's the town, and it's just a small rural community. But there's mental health resources, there's addiction resources, there's job and family resources. There's many things you can get help with. It's just a matter of you have to be aggressive to find help.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, I want to ask you this because I read this in your bio, but you've been married for 47 years, right? Is it Kathy? Is Kathy your wife?
Yeah, actually, 48 now.
48
Yep.
now. Okay, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
congratulations. 48 years is nothing to shake a stick at.
Well, I used to say that people used to hire me because they actually wanted Kathy. So because
Exactly.
she's the better half of me. Trust me on that one.
I say the same thing about my wife. We just celebrated 20 years last week, and I say the same thing. She is anybody that's around me is probably around me for her.
I remember when we were remodeling this house, I literally bought her a table saw for Christmas because we gutted this place. You can see some of the woodwork behind me that was all milled locally, and I did all this work here. How many days or weeks or months did she live in dust and dirt and chaos because she shared the vision? And I don't know of any woman that would do that.
No, it's that's a tough just to think about your own house, right? And renovating your own house while living in it. And then imagine doing your own house that's also going to house other folks. What a stressful situation that could be for someone, right?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Initially, bringing strangers into our own house was not a wise thing to do because it's number one, dangerous, but number two, you
Mhm.
need space. That's why
Yes.
as soon as we could, we started looking for other houses to buy and renovate. And luckily, the market was so deflated that we could buy a house for $20,000, $30,000 during the 2008 slump. And so we were able to buy houses, and now we have 21 different houses that we can house all these people in a safe manner so that they're not living with staff, but they're actually, we call it independent housing.
Yeah. Yeah, so this it's kinda like a I don't wanna I know people call it a lot a halfway house, but basically a way for folks that are coming out of prison to start reinvent not or reintroducing themselves into normal everyday life to where they could be productive members of society, right? That's essentially
Abs-
what you're going for.
I think the colloquial term is halfway house, meaning that it's halfway from prison. The difference legally is that a true halfway house is required by the by your conditions of release, and you cannot leave. And if you do, that's considered a felony. But with our house, it's you choose to be here, and you choose to leave. And what we say is, if you want help, we'll help. If you don't, God bless. And that way, it's more relational rather than punitive.
Yeah, and, it's a great thing that you say that is if you want help, we'll give you help, but if you don't, God bless and may he be on your side as you go through life, but it's like, yeah, you can't really help anybody that doesn't want the help.
We had a fellow leave just yesterday because he came in late for curfew. We have a curfew, we have accountability, we have monitoring, but not a lockdown. And some people just don't like rules. No problem. Rent your
Mhm.
own place, and we wish you the best.
Yep, exactly, and I mean, what's amazing here is that founding Good Samaritan Home sounds super intense, right? You put a lot of work into this, a lot of your money, your time, but essentially, what sparked it? Was it like I got to help people, or did you just, did life just throw it onto you?
I'd like to say that it was an extension of some formal religious program or faith program, but it really wasn't. It was much more personal than that. Faith-based initiatives were very popular at that time in 2001 under George Bush, but that allowed us to apply for grants and such. But the motivation was, I've been in that situation. How can I help somebody who's like me, who needs help so they can avoid some of my mistakes when they're 25 instead of 53?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I think it's a way of saying I want to make my faith tangible in ways that meet the community needs. I don't want to say, "Are you saved?" I want to say, "Are you hungry?" Because that's the pertinent question here.
Yep. Are you seeking the betterness of the life that you want, and can you do that with, I always go back to like, I've worked with people in AA and things like that, like finding your higher power, and realizing that there's more to life than just these minuscule, tangible things that you can feel. There's a lot more to it than just, your everyday is wanting stuff.
Yeah, I think AA is a good example because we don't require a faith of somebody to be here. We just require them to want to be here, and then we can help you.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. And so you've got this, heart for helping people and then you go to write a book about it, right? Can we talk about that next? I want to kind of transition to your book.
Well, I when I was 22 or so, I said I want to write a book, and I was living in my truck traveling the country at the time, and I sat down at my Royal manual typewriter and I typed a
Mhm.
title, and I said, "Gee, I have nothing to say." So I stopped writing. But what I did was I started writing journal notes and just my thoughts over the years. And I had thousands of pages of notes. And when I reached 65 years old, we had been doing Good Samaritan Home for, let's see, about 14 years. And I had all these stories that I felt I could tell. So I decided to sit down and write a fictionalized story about second chances. And because I had been talking to a lot of people about how the community should be involved in helping people with a second chance. And I gave all the
Mhm.
statistics. Nobody hears data. They don't hear recidivism rates. They don't hear even tax expenditures. What they hear is, I don't want those immigrants to cross my border. Very
Right.
similar to what the conversation we're having now. Instead of immigrants, it was ex offenders. So,
Mhm.
what I decided to do was tell a story. So, I compare it to Titanic. Titanic is the story about lifeboat safety. And you could give us a lecture, Make sure you have enough lifeboats. Make sure that you practice on how to lower the lifeboats. Make sure you know how to avoid icebergs. And I guarantee you that movie would not make money. But we put
Right.
Jack and we put Rose and romance and we put a Shakespearean plot together with a great music and cinematography. And suddenly everybody is crying over Jack and Rose. And we're still talking about it today. Well, that's the story I wanted to write, something that people could feel. So I wrote the story of Daniel Robinson coming out of poverty and abuse. And I wrote it, it's fictionalized, but I wrote it in the first person so that you could feel Daniel. And I
Yeah.
wrote and I wrote and I wrote for 10 years. And when I was finally done, after rewriting it 24 times, and I even hired an editor, a professional editor to help me. And I said, this is a good book. And I sent it out to all these publishers, and 200 of them said, no, 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 rejected again and again. And I wanted to give up, but there's a part of me that said, I still believe it's a good story. I'll try one more time. So I connected with a very small publisher called Don Quixote Press. You know, we tilted
Hmm.
windmills. And Don Quixote is an outsider publisher for outsider stories written by outsider writers. There I am. And so
Nice.
it was published in December of 2023, and the odds of making it in the publishing business are slim to
Oh yeah,
nothing.
slim.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because
Yep.
there are a million books published every year, and the average book sells 250 copies, period.
Yeah.
And over the lifetime, maybe 1,000 books, maybe.
Yeah,
So
I heard from a publishing expert that, if you can sell 5,000 books, that's considered an extremely successful book. And, you look at it compared to other things that you sell and you're like, wait, 5,000, that's not a lot.
yeah, it's exactly right. So we all think we're John Grisham. We think we're Kristen Hanna, and those people have publicity teams, and they are good writers, but they also have salespeople full time on their books. So I connected with a publicist, and she taught me how to speak Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. And I became very prolific on making cute little videos that have some sort of depth and meaning. And she introduced me to podcasts and everything. And so what happened was I found there's a real hunger for this message of second chances. And I
Yeah.
think part of it is that the country right now is very angry. We're so tribal. And when I mention second chances, what I hear from so many people is wow, wow. People are hungry to hear good news. And the book not only took off, it has won 43 literary awards this past year. So I mean,
Wow.
it's just
Congratulations.
incredible.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is the reader reviews. I've had uh, I've had upwards of 300 348 reviews on Amazon, and it's rated as what they call a 4.6 out of 5 scale. That means that 91% of the people felt this book was their story, and they would write comments that said, lived Daniel Robinson's story. Daniel Robinson is me. That to me,
Yeah.
that's what it's about. And we've sold 17,000 books so far.
Wow, and you know what? That's amazing too because you're right, people are always I feel like a lot of us are searching, especially I don't know if it's more specifically towards men or maybe I'm just manifesting it because I'm a man, but it always seems like we're searching for something, right? Or we're
Yep.
searching for what can we do to improve ourselves, but yet also help humanity in the same way. And it's good to have this book on second chances because I'm kind of like you, John. I started my career off doing security and then police work, and now I work in technology, specifically in AI. So it's like I've had those second chances just like you have. I've worked many different careers and many different jobs, and I've been able to, like you said, I got my first degree, and you probably grew up the same way I did, where and I know there's a little bit of an age difference, but we were always told, hey, if you get a bachelor's degree, you can write your ticket. And it's
Yeah.
like that's not the case anymore.
No, actually, you're better off to get a plumber's degree.
You are literally become a plumber, an electrician, something like that, right? Skilled trade.
Yeah, it's exactly right. There's less college fees to pay back too.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice to start without the debt.
And I think that's part of it. We were ingrained that if you just got a degree, that you could have a comfortable upper middle class existence. And what we found
Exactly.
was, particularly the economy shifted into a service economy, and
Mhm.
the connection, the union bonding, or the company fidelity just wasn't there. And
Yeah.
so it's
No,
not
you're right.
uncommon to simply be replaced. So getting fired is not nearly as shameful as it once was. It's part of the eliminating fraud and waste, as we now call it.
Yeah, exactly. Eliminating fraud or waste, or they say right sizing a company, right?
Oh,
They
yeah,
use
I love
different
that one.
terms like that, or, making the personnel fit the product. I've heard all kinds of things, but yeah, it's not quite as, back in the day, especially when I started work, if you got fired, that was like you didn't want to carry that around with you, no matter what
That's
the
right.
reason was. But nowadays, I mean, you could get fired or laid off for any reason, and most of the time, it has nothing to do with the quality of work that you performed. It's just a company decision.
Well, look right now at the government downsizing. They say fraud and waste, but we have people who are very qualified, been dedicated for 20 years at a job. They're doing a great job, and they're accused of being non-productive, and
Yeah.
they're let go. There's a let go. This.
Well, and
Uh, what? How do they handle that?
yeah, and one of the things, one of my critiques about it was, so I'm a huge proponent for being extremely frugal with taxpayer money, right? I feel like that's everybody's money; it shouldn't be wasted. But I also believe too, when they went in to try to right size these government departments, they went in with a chainsaw and they should have gone in with a scalpel. It should have been more precise, right? Let's actually look at the people of Dune here. Do they have the intrinsic knowledge to know what our systems are doing? Do they have the experience to back this up and all these things? And I think what they just did was they just went in and said, "Hey, you know what? We need to get rid of X amount of people, and here's the people we're getting rid of." And they really didn't do any analysis onto what those people actually provided to the department.
I used to think back in the 60s that it was a very difficult and nerve-wracking time, unstable time. But this is as close to 1968 as I've seen, and I believe the difference is even greater. The intensity is even greater now because we were opposed to Vietnam. We were opposed to Richard
Hmm.
Nixon. We were opposed to the civil rights violence that led to the Black Power violence in the cities. But at least we felt like there was a belief in the structure of the government. We felt like the people were on the same team. I'm not convinced that that's the case today. I see I see us becoming extremely tribal, and we're going in our. It's probably closer to 1860 than it is to
Yeah, you're
1968.
probably right. Yeah, I mean, the division in the country is just so, one side or the other, and you can almost feel that. Imagine this might have been what it felt like back in the Civil War time. When the South seceded and things like that, because it was different opinions.
And it's one thing to have a different opinion. I see people on Facebook, they'll make a comment and somebody will call them back and say, you're a sleazeball or you're a deplorable
Hmm.
or you're a commie pinko liberal. And nobody from the president on down is impressed with the name calling. Like David Brooks, what the New York Times would say, let's talk about issues. Let's debate the issues.
Exactly.
Let's not throw
Yep.
mud at one another because nobody can see clearly when you have mud in your face.
Yeah, and
So
and I think
and
today's environment makes it so easy to do that, right, John? Because you could sit there with your little keyboard, right, and be what they call the keyboard warrior, and you could say
yeah.
anything you want about anybody without really any thought of, repercussions on you. Whereas if you and I were talking
That's
in
right.
person, if I wanted to call you a name, there's a good chance that there could be a fist coming back in my way, right? I mean, that's the
Exactly.
reality of it where, yeah, we're in our own little bubbles and we feel like people can't hurt us. So we say whatever we say, what we normally probably wouldn't say in a regular conversation face to face.
One of the things I've tried to teach my staff is because we do deal with people who have committed violent felonies, and
Hmm.
many of them, upwards of 80%, could have mental health issues or definitely addiction issues. So, what I've taught my staff is if your resident gets loud, you get soft. If he gets in your face, you back up and you be the calming influence and talk slowly. in that room. I think it applies too to politics. You be the calming influence. You be the voice of reason. You be the adult in the room. And I
Yeah,
try
it
to
seems
do
like
that on
we're
my
lacking.
podcast.
Yeah, we're lacking a lot of adults in Washington D.C. right now, I think.
Yeah,
You know.
I miss John McCain because he when he ran for president, he had his slogan was the Straight Talk Express. But today, straight talk will get you what they call primaried.
Yep,
You'll get voted
exactly.
out, and on Facebook, those are called junior high bullies.
Exactly. It could take you back to high school, junior high, right?
That's
Exactly.
exactly. Now, let me throw something out to you. Whenever there's adversity, George Washington rose to the occasion because it was it was a treasonous time. I mean, every one of the founding fathers legally could have been drawn and quartered and executed, literally drawn and quartered because they committed treason against the king. And in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln came in many ways, was unprepared and unqualified, but he rose to the occasion. And Franklin Roosevelt came into a very, very difficult time, and he rose to the occasion. Can you and I, in our small little way, be a light in the darkness that we're all stumbling around in the darkness of tribalism? Can you and I offer hope in some way? That's what I try to do.
And that's what I try to do as well, to realize that regardless of what our political views might be, we're all human beings. At the end, we breathe the
Right.
same air, we put our clothes on the
That's
same
right.
way, we eat our food the same way. Well, most of us, people have medical conditions, but for the most part, we all do things the same way. We might have different ideas, but sometimes just sit back and have a conversation with somebody, learn where their point of view is coming from, and then share your point of view and explain where it's coming from. And then maybe we can find that common ground.
Exactly right. Now, one of the things I get so frustrated with some of the networks, Fox or CNN or MSNBC in particular, they tend to talk over one another, and they do name calling on both sides of the fence. Whereas when I see David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart on PBS, they will simply share their thoughts one way or the other, and they'll have a view from the left and a view from the right, and they will discuss the issues, and you come away feeling uplifted, not beaten down. And
Yeah,
I
and
admire that.
I think this kinda goes to another thing that I read, John, about you, and I love this idea that you've got that life is written in pencil, and that's such a deep thought, and I think this fits into this, right? Because where did that come from, and can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a key theme that comes out of the book. Daniel Robinson has a counselor who, because he was abused by his pastor, abused by his father, run away from home, lived through all the turmoil of the 60s. And he met a counselor in college who taught him. He had a large cup of pencils with erasers on his desk. And he said, "Why do you have that? Your desk is so except for this corner where you have this beautiful cup with these pencils. I don't understand it." And he said, "Because I've learned in my own life that I've made enough mistakes that I need to start over too many times. So I needed a very big eraser because life is written in pencil, it's not in ink." And here's what he said: "What happened to you was not your fault." And Daniel suddenly realized it's not my fault. And he started life over. It wasn't perfect, but he started and he fell again and he fell again, but he never looked back. He kept running, slowly, but running. And that's the theme. Life is a marathon.
And I love that, John, because you're absolutely right. No matter what we do, each day that we wake up gives us another opportunity to reinvent. I don't want to say reinvent ourselves, but to put our life in the direction we want it to go. So what happened yesterday?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's going to affect us, but today we have a new opportunity to change things.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, in this internet age, Facebook, for example, what I did in sixth grade is splattered across the pages of eternity
Right.
because the internet never forgets or forgives. And
No,
I
you're
think in
right.
particular, I think of a young girl who, because of her insecurities, allows a compromising picture to be posted or at least taken. And without her
Mhm.
permission, it's posted, and she's forever that image. and that can change her life in the wrong direction forever. And that girl needs to be, she needs a very big eraser.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's such a thing that, I didn't have to worry about 20 years ago was people coming back and seeing what I did in high school. The most they could get was maybe my transcript from the high school, but that was about it, where now everything, like you said, everything is online and available. And so you have to be very careful about your online presence. And if there are things that are out there, like you said, there are options to try to erase things, and you can do that, but the fact is someone might have already caught it, in a screenshot or something like that. So just be careful before you post.
Do you remember back in the 70s as well? But do you remember when you had a thing called mooning people?
Yes, yes,
Okay. Well, it was very common just to moon somebody. Remember streaking
yes.
at the Academy Awards once, somebody ran across the stage, streaked the stage, and it was treated the way it was supposed to be treated. They said it's of small consequence, just ignore him. And that said
Yeah,
volumes.
exactly. Yep.
I
Yeah.
remember in college, I mooned the dean out my dorm window. And at the time, it was the dumbest thing I ever did. But today I can laugh about it because the internet doesn't have a picture of me with the blue moon of
Yeah,
Kentucky.
exactly. There's no two moons out tonight, right, John?
That's exactly right. The worst part was he recognized me. Now, how that happened, I don't know.
Exactly. That's awesome. Um, so with your book, I just want to ask, and I think we get the idea of it, but what's the main thing, or, I know we already talked about a good theme, but what's the main thing that you want folks to get out of the book that you wrote?
Well, you like to think that when you turn your life around or you start to turn around, things will always work well. But I like to say that we all have been born with a limp of some sort. Now, it could be the poverty you were born into, or the abuse that you were born into, or the wrong choices. And so you have a limp like this crooked finger of mine. And
Mhm.
if you hook up with people who have a limp, you're going in the wrong direction. So if you can get the right people, you can lean on one another. So the theme of the book is that if you if you have a limp, if you have what I call a club foot where you can't walk fast or even straight, if you get somebody to walk with you, and then don't try to compare yourself to the fast runner, the guy who's the hero, the basketball hero or football hero. Compare yourself to the guy in the mirror. That's the only one that matters. And Daniel made a lot of mistakes, but in the end, it's a love hate story. It's a bittersweet story because life is bittersweet, and
Yeah.
there are consequences. You like to think it all works out well if you make the right decision, but those decisions, like the one character Charles in the book, who was unfairly and unjustly accused of rape and spent 20 years in prison, and he came to live with Daniel, and Daniel helped him, but he helped Daniel learn how to forgive his past demons. So Charles, who had a limp, and Daniel had a limp, and together they could support one another. So that's the theme. There are second chances, but you have to keep walking. And hopefully it's a Titanic story that has emotions that will I just like to say bring some Kleenex. You'll need them.
Yeah, and John, I wanted to ask you too because you said this book took you a long time to write. And did this feel kind of like therapy to you, or was it more like a mission, once you got going?
Well, it's not autobiographical, but obviously every fiction story is based in some truth somewhere. So it follows my experiences coupled with the people I've met, but absolutely therapeutic, absolutely. Because the truth is that I have obviously a very strong bond with my wife, and the character of Daniel's wife is not based solely on my wife, but much of her experiences, and it portrays my relationship with her. There's something that happens in that family, and I still get emotional when I read that scene. And I wrote the damn thing, and I know how it's going to end
Yeah.
up, but I still get emotional over it.
No, I love that though because it shows that you really put your heart into the book and are really trying to get people, to know and be vulnerable and to see that there's these situations they're not alone out there and they can start again. Just because something bad happened, you have that opportunity to start again.
Well, I'll give you a spoiler alert here. At the end of the book, there's an epilogue where Daniel comes across a letter that his wife has written to him years ago, and he reads that. And do you remember in the Civil War series, Ken Burns, there was a letter written by a Rhode Island major called Sullivan Ballou. He wrote it to his wife, and he was killed at First Battle of Bull Run. He had written this note to her, and every time I hear that note read, I get very emotional because it's so personal, and it's true. So Daniel's epilogue, he finds a letter written from his wife from years ago, and it reminds me a great deal of Selim Ballou, that love can even transcend the grave. And true love is not about sex, and it's not about belongings. It's about soul connection. And I have more wrinkles than I have. My wife has wrinkles, but to me, she's still 25 years old, and we're still the kids dating that we did 50 years
Yeah.
ago.
It's so funny you say that, John. My wife and I were just talking about that, and I said, when we hit 20 years, I'm like, this did not seem like 20 years. I mean, it went by super fast, So it's like
My,
you do it, and that connection, I can't imagine having gone through the last 20 years without her.
but the funny part is that I was the one doing all the physical work because of my background in construction, but now I'm doing work on the computer with Good Samaritan Home with my writing because I'm writing a sequel now. But my wife,
Nice.
Kathy, my wife is my age. I'm 77, and my wife is, I won't say how much, but she's a little older than me. And on any given day, I find her at one of our properties. She's putting trim around a baseboard. She's painting a wall. She's patching a hole in the drywall. She's scrubbing floors. One day we had a sewer line back up into our basement apartment, and we had literal sewage pouring out
Ugh.
into the floor, into the heat ducts, all over the floor downstairs. I called a salvage company, a cleaning company. They wouldn't touch it. Guess who cleaned it?
Wow.
My wife. She
Wow.
spent days cleaning raw
I
sewage.
can
Not
imagine, and that's
now
disgusting.
that
Yeah.
that's raw sewage from the street line, not from the building. It came
Yeah,
up
it's
the
not even your
street and
own.
into our house. Not even
Yeah.
our own. Like that makes a
Yeah,
difference.
that's no, yeah, but
But
you're right.
anyway,
It at least you can have
that's
some
what love
solace knowing it
is.
was your
That's what
own.
love is.
It is. No, you're absolutely right. And you know what, John, you clearly have a knack for shining light in dark places. But I kind of want to shift gears a little bit, if it's okay with you, and talk about a little bit of the real world stuff you've seen. Obviously, I don't want any names or anything like that, but you've worked with a lot of, ex-offenders and people trying to get back on their feet. But what's the wildest or even probably better, most inspiring thing that you've seen come out of your work with these folks?
Well, the two that come to mind is our very first resident. He came to us, a black man coming from Cleveland, coming to a white community. He said he was as afraid of the white community as the white community was afraid of him. But he stuck it out. He got a job. He reconnected with his daughter. He literally stayed in our home until he could get back on his feet. And now, 24 years later, he's stayed in contact with us. And he's been driving truck for UPS for the past, I think, 10 years. And he's married. He's helped raise his grandchildren. But he said what made a difference in his life was those mornings in our house when we're still under construction. He and my wife sat in front of the fireplace in the morning when nobody was up because we heated with wood. And they talked, but she never gave advice. She never gave criticism. She never told him what to do. She simply listened. And he started to get emotional just telling this story. He said, she saved my life because she made me feel like I was worthwhile. And
Yeah, and sometimes that's
I
all
was
we need,
overcome with
right?
that.
Yeah.
That to me that's the essence of the book. Listening to people and saying, your time with me is the most important thing right now.
Yeah.
That
And you
was
know
a
what?
lesson for me to learn.
And John, just listening, right? That just listening, because so often, especially myself, I like to be a problem solver. And sometimes all you need to do is listen. You don't need to solve the problem for someone. Now, if they ask for it, sure, you can give advice, right? But just listen.
Ironically, that's what he said about me. He said, "Yeah, I have more answers," and that's my flaw. I like to give people answers because that's what my position requires. But also, the people we deal with don't have any answers. But my wife is actually much, much better at that than I am.
Yeah, and you know what? The weird thing too is like society is really quick to judge people in their past. So how do you keep, pushing for second chances when the world's really kind of going against you and saying, "Nah, they're done."
I think yeah, I think about the politicians today who would make a statement, say, "I'll never do this. I'm opposed to that. My principles won't allow me to do it," and then they get threatened and they immediately turn around and cave. And I thought, why is it? What's wrong with these people that they're going against what they say they believe in because they're afraid they'll lose their job? But I have a slogan that I remind myself of because my career changes. I tell myself when I'm under great pressure to conform, I always say I've been thrown out of better bars than this one. And what that means is you can't take from me what I freely give. And that's something
Yes,
that Dr. King said. Dr. King said, if you don't have something worth dying for, then you're not fit to live. And that means getting fired for principle,
yeah, yep,
not for cause, but for principle. So I would say in the little things where you make decisions to do the right thing, that when the big thing comes along, I believe you can do it. But if you don't do the small things, I don't think you can ever do the big things when they come. So I
I
give you
agree
an
with you.
example. When I started Good Samaritan Home, we had tremendous blowback. Where there were petitions coming at us. There were threats. I had a lady threaten to kill me in McDonald's, a grandmother. I had police protection going to meetings. And we ended up being sued and suing the city 3 different times. And it took 7 years to completely clear the air of all the issues that we were facing. But we never backed down because I was committed. Not that I'm that strong. It's just that I was committed to the principle, committed to the cause. That the worst they could do was close my house and I could lose my job. So I'll go to the next job. But they can even put me in jail, but they can't take me unless I give them
Yes,
me. That's the point.
exactly. Yep, and I
So
love that, and, it's so often too that, a lot of people think, "Oh, I have to take care of my family," but we can't give up our moral beliefs, especially when you talked about, like, with a job, if you say, "I will never do this," and then someone says, "Well, you have to do this or you're gone," it's a tough situation to be in, but I'm like you, if we have good moral upbringing and it goes against our beliefs of what is right and wrong, unfortunately, like a buddy of mine used to say, "I was looking for a job when I found this one,"
that's
so it's
that's
like,
exactly right.
yeah, but yeah, that's go
I
ahead.
think we're instinctively drawn to people who have intestinal fortitude. A good example would be Danielle Sassoon, the federal prosecutor who resigned from I think it was the Southern District of New York, because she was asked to compromise on the Mayor Adams case. And she refused to compromise what she knew to be her moral responsibility. And so she said, I'd rather have no job than to have a job that causes me to lose my conscience. And
Exactly.
I give her, and I'm sure she'll end up landing on her feet, but it may cost her a
Oh,
great
yeah.
deal.
Yeah, there's always gonna
And
be a setback, and I mean, there's consequences for everything, right, John? And I mean, whether they be positive or negative, whatever we do, there's gonna be some type of consequence to it, and that could be a good or bad, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes when we have to stand up, it might be tough for a while, but we have to remember ourselves and be true to ourselves and just make sure that we keep pushing forward.
I don't know the exact number, but my understanding is that every one of the Declaration of Independence signers either lost their land, lost a member of their family, lost their money, or lost their lives. Everybody was affected by the revolution. It wasn't simply a meeting. It happened in Philadelphia and they went off to the farm. That's not how it worked.
Yep. Nope. Yeah, and they were active. I mean, they were active in the war effort and making sure that, the soldiers had what they needed or even fighting themselves, you know?
Absolutely. Anything that doesn't have cost, anything doesn't cost us, doesn't have any, it doesn't build character. And character does not come easily. It comes in the hard times.
It does. You're absolutely right. We learn more from the hard times than we do the good times, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. What will you do when it gets hard? That's the important thing. I don't know all the background on it, but Lisa Murkowski is the senator from Alaska, and she was very opposed to the current bill. She said, "I can't do it. I can't do it. It'll affect my people." So what she ended up doing was they offered her so many incentives directed towards her state that she ended up
Hmm.
compromising what she felt to be her belief for her for these compromises that benefited one state out of 50. And I understand that as a senator for Alaska, that made sense. But as a U.S. senator dealing with
Yes.
340 million people, was that the right decision?
Yeah, and I think they forget that sometimes, obviously you want to take care of the people that voted for you in your state, right? The people that elected you, but you're not just a senator for that state. You're a senator for all Americans. Your vote is going to impact everybody.
I just wonder if we had to fight the Civil War again, would we do it, or would we simply say, let's strike a deal? After all, the black population
Right.
is only 12, they're only 12%. And besides, they look happy on the plantation.
Yeah,
And
right, exactly.
there were people who actually believed that and still believe that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and it's just ridiculous, if you think about it, and using any type of slave labor, and even if it's like I looked at like legal immigration and using a lot of illegal immigrants to work on farms and stuff like that. I even tell those people, I'm like, how can you live with yourself paying these people less than an American citizen just because they're not an American citizen? It's like you're literally using a form of slave labor because you're willing to pay them less because of their situation.
I've tried to just try to simplify this whole situation in its most common basic form. What does it come down to for me? And I concluded that if we believe that we are made in the image of God, that means that you and I and Reggie and I and that Chinese woman and that Palestinian man are made in the image of God, and therefore they are my brother. And when
Hmm.
that man and that woman come across the border looking for a job, even though the laws say you have to go through this process, they know they'll starve to death in Tijuana. They are here because they're desperate for their family, which is exactly what millions of people did in our country from really from 1600 until today.
Yeah.
And and as a believer in the creator God, if I believe what I say, then that immigrant is my brother. Now, how
Mhm.
do I help him? I don't want chaos. It's not either or, but I believe that calling him a rapist and a murderer simply because he's brown is not the direction that I believe God would have me go.
Right. No, and I agree with you that too, a rapist and a murderer should only be that title should only be given to someone that actually does that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If that's something that you've done, I mean, obviously that's your title, but yeah, not everybody. It's like saying, with me being a police officer, when you hear like of a shooting of an unarmed black man and they blame all police everywhere. It's like, listen, that's one situation, that's one person. And so you can't paint
Absolutely.
a broad spectrum brush over everybody just because of something one person does.
I'm inclined to believe that fundamentalism, these knee jerk reactions, come from the left and the right. And I found name calling from the left, and many of the issues the left has come up with are they're contrary to science. They're contrary to what we believe to be moral, let alone what we
Mhm.
believe to be what I call Darwinian. There are certain laws that nature has set up for survival that we have to look at them not from our religious viewpoint, but from our biological viewpoint. Can we be rational? Let's look at gender. Let's look at those issues from a biological standpoint, not because my church says so or because my Democratic Party says so.
Right, exactly. Let's look at people throw this around too, but common sense sometimes is pretty common. It's very easy, but it seems like it's such a far-fetched idea nowadays for that common sense is no longer so common, you know?
Absolutely. That's why I started writing a column on Substack so that I could at least expand on some of my thinking and try to get people to reason. And the idea is that if you have a position, you make a point, you just don't say all women are to submit to their husbands, as some people have
Yeah.
said. No, what you say is in the context, what that verse meant was that you're supposed to co-equal, you're supposed to respect one another. It doesn't mean submit in the form of abuse. It means
No, not at
respect
all.
one another. And that's the
Yeah,
nuance
because
that we're not seeing today.
and I think that's, a lot of people take specifically Bible verses out of context to use them towards a goal
Yeah.
that they're going to. And sometimes you look at things and you say, you know what, it's out of context, but in a way that you don't realize that, like you just said, the verse that you said, is that a wife is to submit to her husband. But it also tells the husband that they should treat their wife like Jesus taught the church. You should treat them with respect and dignity, and that's the basis of it. So it's like you've got to take the whole thing. You can't just take one verse and run with it. You've got to read the whole thing and put it all together.
Let me throw this out here. I'll be devil's advocate. There was an example of the woman caught in the act of adultery, and the question was, the law says we should stone her. Jesus, what do you say we should do? They were trying to catch him in a situation where he could be criticized both ways. And then the answer was, those who are without sin can throw the first stone.
Cast the first
But
stone. Yep.
my question is, where was the man caught in adultery? Why didn't they bring him out there? Because Jesus was opposed to the double standard that we are so comfortable with. And truth is, if I were a woman, I would be an angry woman too because of things like that.
Yeah. Yep. You can totally understand it.
Although
All
I
right,
would not
John.
be a very attractive woman.
Yeah, you and me both. I don't even have the hair for it.
Yeah, well, I'm getting
But
less of it, so
yeah. It's John, I want to lighten things up a little bit. I have a little section that I like to call Dude Q&A. It's just a couple of
uh,
rapid fire questions, just an opportunity for people to get to know you. No overthinking, just some quick hit answers, and if you're ready, we'll get started.
well, I have no
This is going to
guarantee,
be
but we'll
super
try
easy.
it.
All right.
Thank you. I need
Coffee
easy.
or yeah, coffee or tea? What's your go-to?
Tea.
Tea? All right. I like it. I'm actually both myself, so I'll go coffee in the morning and tea in the afternoons just to get out of the caffeine drama there.
Well, I need caffeine to stay awake, but also I have to say, clarify, iced tea, iced tea. There's a difference.
Iced tea. Oh, I love iced tea. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely my favorite. Um, favorite guilty pleasure movie?
Well, let's see. I probably have to say Titanic because and another one is A League of Their Own. I love that
Yeah, that's a
story.
good movie.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. If you could time travel, where are you going? Past or the future?
Definitely the past. I'm very nostalgic for the past, and I would probably be a pioneer going west to no man's land because that's what I've done all my
That would be
life.
awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah. And then worst job you've ever had?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll give you one. I went to Detroit after college. First night in Detroit, downtown Detroit. I was hired as a security guard in the middle of the ghetto to sit in a car in the middle of December in Detroit. And the average temperature in December is 35 degrees and raining. I lasted one
Yep.
night.
That was it, huh?
That was it.
That's yeah, that those could be some boring nights too, doing security. I've done that myself.
I could feel the brain cells just start to dissipate.
Yeah, exactly. Pizza. Do you pineapple on it? Yes or no?
Love pineapple. I love the flavor. It
Do you?
gets my taste buds
So I
going.
love pineapple on its own, but I can't have it on a pizza. I don't know what it is. I just can't mix the sweet and savory. There's sweet and salty tastes.
You're a conservative. You're a fundamentalist. Off with your head.
Yeah, exactly. What's the one song that you blast when no one's around?
That's interesting. Probably Merle Haggard because he's
Yeah.
probably and the one that I holding things together. That's where he was just a lament about raising his daughter alone. And Merle Haggard is probably the most passionate songwriter of all genres. And he not only did he write well, but he sang it with emotion. And I wish I could sing. I really do.
Yeah, that's a great answer because Merle Haggard, yeah, he's got so many good hits and songs that just, you can relate to, which is I love that answer. That's a great answer.
They pull at
If
your
you
heartstrings.
They do, yeah. If you weren't If you weren't helping people or writing, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd probably be, I go to Texas to write. So I like to go to West Texas. I would probably be alone back in the wilderness off the grid where no one can find me. And they would just eventually find my mummified bones laying out in the woods because
I
at
love
least
that.
I'd die
Just getting
happy.
away
I'd
from
die
it.
happy. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
exactly. Just getting
No
away from it,
noise,
get out in
no
nature.
noise.
Yep. I love it. That's what my wife and I go camping quite a bit, and that's what I love to do is just try to disconnect, relax, enjoy being in the nature, maybe do some fishing, those sorts of things. But yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, last
Yeah, there's
one. Hopefully this
too
hasn't been
much
too
noise in
bad.
our culture. We need that quiet.
There
Okay, go ahead.
is. There is. All right, last one. Aliens. Real or no?
Intellectually, it's like in the movie what with Jodie Foster, where she was a scientist. She said, "With all that space out there, there has to be somebody else." Now, intellectually, I believe there it makes sense that there is, but I can't even begin to fathom that there are others. I can't imagine that's beyond my comprehension, and I definitely don't think that they're visiting us regularly.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so either. And I think if they if they visited now, they might turn around and go home. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they wouldn't find any intelligent life.
Exactly, exactly. It would definitely be lower on the spectrum, I think.
My question is, would ICE be able to stop them at the border?
Yeah, exactly. And which border, right?
Yeah,
Because right, there's north and south, but what about up?
yeah. Now that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, that is fun. Well, that's awesome. That was it. Hopefully you liked it. I just like to get those in there to throw some quick, quirky questions out for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. But
Well,
let's
at least
wrap this up with some final.
you didn't ask me
Go
about
ahead.
quantum physics, so I'm glad to hear that.
No, no, trust me, because if I were to ask that, I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, then I can answer it.
Yeah, exactly. You could. I would never know the truth.
That's right. Yeah, I can't impress you
But
with my intellect. I'll baffle you with my bullshit.
yeah, exactly. And I have my own bull that I can sling on my own. So John, we could be a good company there. But John, this has been really awesome. I really love it. But before we bounce, I want to let you what would you tell anybody out there who's, kind of feeling stuck or maybe running as fast as he or she can but not getting anywhere?
I would say don't be afraid to try something new. Just get out of your comfort zone. And sometimes it's just a matter of doing some small act of kindness. Like you see somebody walking the street and you help them across because you know that they're struggling. Just a little act can change them and change you. But keep on moving. The guy who's running fast is running a different race entirely. Don't look at him. Only keep running your own race.
Yep, I love that, John. That's fantastic. And where can the dudes and dudettes out there find your stuff? As far as your books, where they can maybe get a contact with you, and if you have any social media.
The easiest thing to do is just go to my author page. It's johndavidgraham.com. Very simple. And that'll link you to Amazon. You can check out the book. There's some free chapters you can download. It's available in all formats. There are links for my Substack and the social media. But also you can contact me. I'd be glad to talk to anybody if they have anything that we can discuss. The only thing I ask is don't send me any pictures of girls because I get a lot of those on. Uh, and they say hello, friend, and
Yeah,
I off. Yeah, I guarantee you that 20-year-old girl is actually a 40-year-old Russian with a
yeah,
mustache
yeah, exactly. Or a bot.
or a bot. Yeah, if I'm
Yeah,
lucky.
exactly.
But yeah,
And John,
feel
just so
free.
you
Check
know,
out the book. Check out the book.
yeah. And John, just so you know, and so our listeners know, I also will have a guest page for you on my website as well, justadudepodcast.com. So it'll have a picture of you. It'll have your website, any social media that you provided or that we have, I'll put on there as well. So you can either go to johndavidgraham.com or justadudepodcast.com and get all that information for John today and get in touch with him. But John, I really want to thank you for hanging out with us. You're definitely a solid guy with a solid story. But are there any last words that you'd like to leave for our listeners?
Life is a marathon, not a sprint. So keep on running.
Absolutely. I'm familiar with that verse that I believe Paul said that, wasn't it? That
To a
he's
degree, I paraphrase.
yeah,
You're right.
Paraphrase, but yes, exactly. And I love that. I think it's great advice because I think all of us want to go fast, but realize, yes, it is a marathon, not a sprint. So
Yep,
small steps make a big difference.
absolutely. My pleasure. I have very much enjoyed this, Nathan. Thank you, brother.
All right. That's it for this episode of Just a Dude podcast. Big thank you to John Graham. Go out there and check out his book and his work. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next episode, I'm Nathan with Just a Dude podcast. Stay chill and keep running your race.